Hello and welcome back to the third episode of this series. Now, the title of this specific video is called Data Collection and Why You Should Model Your Database. Now, this will be a very logical intensive course video because we're going to be talking a bunch about why you should model your database. Now, this this will not include a lot of actual modeling, more the theory behind it and why you should do this. A lot of time is spent when it comes to creating a database in trying to figure out the draft for the actual database and what the database might look like when it's finished. All of this work is done even before a single line is created in the actual database management system. So, why is it that we spend this much time on a project before we even start writing the actual database and try it out? Well, one of the reasons for this is that we want to create an effective and long-lived database. And what is crucial is to identify and weed out all of the problem areas before we implement the database. It is easier to discover, rectify, and modify a database before it is implemented and everything is still in one piece of paper or in a model that we can show online. Think of it like this. Say you were going to build a home for you and your family, but you didn't want to hire an architect, and so you went at it yourself by going out and cutting down some logs. Now, without a plan for how to build your own home, you will quickly figure out that the house that you built for your family has a lot of issues with it because you've maybe forgot about the isolation between the walls, or because you forgot about plumbing when the flooring was already installed. It's the same way with a model for your database. Without a model, you will end up making more costly mistakes than you would if you had taken a moment and created a model. When we are working with clients that have ordered a job for a database to be built, it is an important part as well as to create this model, as it will ensure that you, as the technical side of things, can communicate with the people sitting across the table from you about how the database is formed and what's included in it. An easy to convey model is what we build first. This is the conceptual model. Now, the conceptual model is built to be able to hammer down the nails of what we are supposed to be putting inside of the database and what is not supposed to be there. It will be from this model that the rest of the project will proceed. Now, imagine you're going to the company that hired you and just gave them a database and called it a day. There will be a lot of issues with doing this, chief among which is the company have no idea what entities you have chosen to include and how you have structured your database. Maybe you chose to have the entire name as a single row instead of dividing it up into surname and name. What I'm trying to say with this is that creating a model is part of the work that we're supposed to do, and getting good at doing them will land you more and better paying jobs, as well as making you look more professional. So now that I've given you the big hammer of modeling, it's time to dive into the first out of three models that we just mentioned, the conceptual model. So, how do we start with a conceptual model? And perhaps more importantly, where do we start? Well, it all starts with something called data collection, where the first step is to ask a simple few questions to get the ball rolling. Now, here you have a list of 5 questions that you should answer before you start to create your conceptual model. And these are: what type of organization is it and what do they do? What information might be interesting to store? What problems are there at the moment that needs to be solved? What do we want the database to be able to do? Who is going to use the database and in what environment? Now, answering these questions will allow you to lay out the foundation to the database by ascertaining some general ideas, such as what problems or solutions, as well as restrictions, might arise from the users and the organization. Now, what we mean by this is the organization going to tell you that we don't want to include this or that we want to include this? And are the users going to tell you that, oh, we definitely want this included in the database and this is not really a big deal? So by having all of this information in the back of your mind, you can already start to figure out what's important to the organization and the users. Secondly, we're gonna try to identify some transactions, which is also known as functional requirements. And these are the things that the database is supposed to pull. So let's say that you have HR at the company, and you speak to the HR rep, and they tell you that, oh, we would really like a database where we can pull all the names of all the employees and their salaries. This is a functional requirement. So here we have the need for the database to store names and salaries, and the database is supposed to pull this information, which means that they have to be related to one another. The third requirement, or the third thing that you can actually figure out from this, is to identify some system requirements, or what we call a non-functional requirement. Now this might be speed of queries, it might be how the actual tables are supposed to be formatted, it might be anything that's not an actual transaction. There are different techniques to collect all information needed to identify the functional and non-functional requirements for the organization. And here are some of these. You can either go through documentation that's already in place at the company. Maybe they have data that they did that last time they were going to upgrade their database, or they have some other data that they recently collected. You can do interviews with employees as well as other actors that might have an interest in the system, such as customers, stakeholders, third-party users, and the like. You can send out surveys to those who are going to use the database to try and ascertain what they might want to have in the database, as well as you can just observe. So if you do a on-site visit, you should just take a moment to observe what all of the people working there are doing to get their information, and if there is any problem that you see that you can solve. Now the last one is prototyping, and here we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but prototyping is basically a conceptual model that works. So having gone through all of the above mentioned points to get your database model off the ground, it's time to decide what type of entities that should be applicable to your database. And a full list of words from your data collection should be drawn up at this point in the development, as well as it will help you narrow down the list down to the most essential entities. And this is something that we're going to be talking about in the next episode. So with that said, I'd like to thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.